Our second reading is from Psalm 50, verses 7 through 15. Hear, O my people, and I will speak. O Israel, I will testify against you. I am God, your God. Not for your sacrifices do I rebuke you. Your burnt offerings are continually before me. I will not accept a bull from your house or goats from your folds, for every wild animal of the forest is mine. The cattle on 1,000 hills, I know all the birds of the air, and all that moves in the field is mine. If I were hungry, I would not tell you, for the world and all that is in it is mine. Do I eat the flesh of bulls or drink the blood of goats? Offer to God a sacrifice of thanksgiving and pay your vows to the Most High. Call on me in the day of trouble. I will deliver you, and you shall glorify me. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
That passage from Psalm is one of my favorite. I love how God gives us a reality check about the sacrifices, and if we think that we are doing God a favor by giving these offerings, he reminds us that all of this is his anyway, remember? So I love that passage. Well, for the last month, we have been talking about this question, does it matter? If you remember, 3 weeks ago, I started this conversation by telling you about a meeting that I had when I was pastor in Vancouver, Washington, with then Bishop Galvan. And he asked us as a group of pastors who were gathered in that room, what would happen if our church disappeared or blew away? And we had this very awkward and strange conversation about what would happen. And basically asking that question, does it matter that we're here? We spent some time 2 weeks ago talking about, does the church matter? We talked about the idea of what church really is and how sometimes we can easily replace the word church for either a building or a worship service, but at the heart of what church really is a community of people who have made a covenant together to live this life as disciples, to make this journey of faith together, to worship together, to be in service together, to grow in our spiritual lives and make friendships as we make this journey together. And I hope that as we were done, we came to the realization that it does matter that the church is here. Last week, we talked a little bit about the buildings and these facilities, these sacred places where we come together, where children are baptized, where we join our lives together in holy matrimony as we watch friends make those commitments. We say goodbye to friends as they leave this earthly realm and as we hand them over to the grace of God, that these buildings are sacred. And although they are expensive, and at chapters in life, like the chapter we're in right now, buildings are increasingly expensive, but they matter, right? Well, today we're going to ask another question, and I know that as soon as I bring this up, there's a different mood that falls in the room. Does it matter if we support our church financially? Now, I know some of us do this when I have this conversation. I used to do this when we have that conversation. For a long time, I was really uncomfortable as a pastor talking about finances with the congregations I served. It was an uneasy conversation, and I was talking with a very good friend of mine. He's actually a pastor over at Riverview United Methodist Church, Derek McGuckin, and we were both serving churches at the time that did big finance campaigns in the fall, and we were trying to put together some new wonderful sermon that would inspire everybody to give lots of money, right? And we were both commenting about how uncomfortable that made us feel. And Derek made a statement. He said, well, I'm becoming less and less uncomfortable in that. And I said, why? And he said, well, you know, as a pastor and as a preacher, every week it's my job to come up and try to make some connection with the things that are important in the world and the things that are important in our faith, and to try to bring those things together and give us a way to act out this faith in the world that we live in. He said it wouldn't be unusual for me to talk about ways that we can be in service to the community. In fact, if I didn't, people would say, how come you never preach about us being in service to the community? I could bring up things about how we grow in spiritual life and the importance of Bible reading or being involved in the community around us, or all of those things that are so important to us. But yet, in the community that we live, in the culture we are part of, one of the most important things in our lives is finances. And if we bring up finances as it relates to faith, we feel uncomfortable. Why is that? And I said, yeah, which I always say to Derek when he's right. And I've become less and less uncomfortable because one of the things that's evolving in my life is understanding the things that are important and how they relate to not only my faith in God, but how they relate to my relationship with each of us here in our community. And finances are just one of those things. Now, as we talk about finances, I have to admit I have had a kind of messed up relationship with finances. I think most of us have had a messed up relationship with finances. Friends who are counselors tell me that by far the number one reason couples come in for couples counseling is finances. By far. And not because there's a lack of them, but because of the messed up relationship that we have with them, right? I have to admit, the way that my relationship with money, I tell this joke all the time, if money talks, mine says goodbye most of the time, right? But the relationship that I was taught, either intentionally or subconsciously with money, was this. This represents my relationship with money for years. If you want this $20 bill, you're going to have to do $20 worth of finger prying to get this $20 bill, right? Or you're going to have to give me something that's worth $20 if you want this $20 bill. I'm going to hold on to it until I get something that's worth this. And I have to admit, I am not an economics major. I don't get economics. I don't get how this money, this piece of paper, I mean, I kind of understand that this piece of paper represents $20 worth of gold that exists somewhere, it's witchcraft. I don't know how this works. All I know is that if I give you $20, I'm going to get $20 worth of something in return. And if I give you $20 and I only get $2 worth of stuff in return, I'm going to be upset. So my relationship with money is like this, which is the way I think a lot of us have a relationship with money. If you want this money, you better give me something that's worth this, otherwise these fingers are not letting go. Any kind of relationship where this is the symbol, any kind of thing that's important in our lives where this is the symbol of what it's like, can't be healthy. I mean, imagine if my relationships with people were like this. What if I came out every Sunday morning to this congregation that I'm growing to love, and I came out and I said, "Good morning, friends." You would say, "What's wrong with Pastor Mark?" If I came to my family, if I woke up in the morning and said, "Good morning, Jennifer, love you." I mean, every time God speaks to us in Scripture about things that are important, the relationship isn't this. It's this. But when it comes to finances, I know that I've learned this. And that shouldn't be the way it is. Finances are a strange thing. I have to use this in the next service, and then it'll go on the offering plate. You have the ushers check me just to make sure. Now I lost my place. What was I talking about? Oh, so in college, there's a reason why we're kind of trained that way, right? In college, I had a minor in sociology. And in one of the sociology classes, we read this experiment that has been done over and over again. Chimpanzees, if you don't know, chimpanzees share about more than 90% of the same DNA that we have. And chimpanzees also have a lot of social blocks in their social interaction that are very similar to humans, and we do a lot of the same things, believe it or not. If you ask my family, they would tell you that Dad is a lot like a monkey, right? I mean, so there's some resonance there. But there's this experiment that we read about in sociology class. It's been replicated over and over, in which You can teach monkeys to use money. Did you know that? It's not that difficult. What you do is you give them poker chips or some coin of some kind. You have a trainer go in with a grape and take the poker chip and give them a grape. And pretty soon they understand that a poker chip is worth a grape. And so they taught monkeys how to use money. And over a series of weeks, a trainer would come in and give a monkey a grape, and he would get his poker chip in payment for it. After they established that idea, they then brought in another trainer who would come in and would go to the window where the feeding was happening, and the monkey would give him a token, and instead of getting one grape, they'd get 3 grapes. And as you can tell, monkeys very quickly understood that when that guy comes in, I get 3 grapes. When that guy comes in, I only get 1. Guess which person they were more affectionate to? Guess which person they paid attention to? And guess which person they ignored? The one who gave them 3 grapes, right? When the first person would come in, no monkey would go to the window when the first guy came in. When the second guy would come in, they would all rush to the window because they knew they were going to get 3 grapes. Then they went to the next stage of the experiment. The first guy who came in, who only gave them 1 grape, came in and gave them 2 grapes. And when they understood that they were getting something more than they were expecting, they were a little more kind. They didn't quite ignore him as much, and a few of the monkeys actually paid money for the 2 grapes. This went on for a number of weeks, and then they changed to in which the guy who had 3 grapes walks in, and he puts the 3 grapes on the side of the window, and they would come up, they would give him their coin, he would take one of the grapes away and give them 2. They very quickly didn't like that guy anymore. In fact, the whole community of monkeys would get stressed and angry. Now, they still wouldn't pay attention to the first guy, but they were mad at the second guy. Which now, for us, in a reasonable thinking way, one of the things that makes us different than monkeys is that we can manipulate our environment and overcome some limitations that we have. But for them, for the monkeys, they would get stressed and they would be really angry, but they were both getting 2 grapes, right? Regardless of who they went to, when they gave a coin, they got 2 grapes. But when they got something less than they expected, they were angry. And is there a chainsaw going outside or something? Is that what that is? I thought I was having a stroke for a second. That's okay. So anyway, so they would be really, it's called a fear of risk, which explains a whole lot why when markets get volatile and things like that, even though the amount of money is the same, the way we react to it in consumer confidence kinds of things makes a big difference in the economy. Because we're trained to hold our money like this. But God tells us that we should have this kind of relationship with finances. I can remember when I went off to college, actually before I went off to college, I got my first job. I was a dishwasher at Giashi's restaurant there at the corner by Howard Amon Park. And I was a senior in high school, and I was washing dishes. I was living at home. I had no bills at all. All I did was just make money at that job, right? And my dad, I remember, sat me down and had a conversation with me because I wanted to take the money that I had been raising during the summer in that summer job and buy a motorcycle. And I don't know if Dad just didn't want me to buy a motorcycle or what, but he sat down with me and had a conversation with me, and he said, you know, you should give some of that money to the church. And I didn't do this to my dad, but inside I was thinking, yeah, sure, I should give some of my money to the church. Do you know how hot it is in Giashi's restaurant washing dishes in August? I worked hard for that money. I'm not going to give it to the church. And he could tell I wasn't particularly receptive to the lecture that I was getting. I'm sorry, it was a loving conversation. It wasn't a lecture. Anyway. And so he said, well, you know, Mark, you grew up in the church, and it's been an important part of your life, and you've been involved in youth groups, and you've even led worship at the church, and if you don't give money, then how's this place going to continue? And it wasn't his fault, but what he kind of did for me was then he turned my idea of money into an investment, right? And so I thought, well, that's true. If I give money, then this thing will keep going. If I give $20 to the church, I'll get $20 of benefit back from the church, right? Which then didn't change my idea about money. It didn't even change my idea about church. It just put me in a place where I said, well, I'll decide what I'm going to give my $20 to. If going to church, if Joe Harding had a good sermon that day, then there was $20 in the offering plate. If it wasn't that good, maybe $5. If the youth group was doing something that I thought was really cool, there'd be $20 in the offering plate. If they were doing something that didn't really relate to me, or I didn't really care about it, or I didn't get any benefit out of, maybe $5. I'd go to Winchell's Donuts instead. Do you remember Winchell's Donuts? They were awesome. Anyway, I digress. But it still was this idea. I'll make sure that I give money, but I'll only give it if you do what I want with it. You better do $20 worth of prying on my fingers to get this $20 bill. Which is a spiritual issue, isn't it? We don't often think of our finances as a spiritual issue, but they are. Because they're a symbol of wealth, and they're a symbol of our identity and of our value, right? They're a symbol in our community that if you have more money, you have a different place in society than you do in other places of society if you have less money, right? And we're not too sure we want to get rid of that. But over and over again in Scripture, this isn't the image. This is the image. Does it matter if we financially contribute? Let me tell you this. This might surprise some of you. God doesn't need cash. We just saw that passage of Scripture in Psalm where God said, do I need your sacrifice? Do I eat goats and do I eat these sacrifices that you give me? No, I own them all anyway. It's like me going through my mom's purse and finding something in there to give her for her birthday present, right? God owns it all anyway. I mean, the idea is that not only does giving help us do these things, but there's something about us that we need to give. If we don't, it wrecks our soul. One of the things, there are tons of experiments and tons of studies that go on about the nature of giving in people, and especially in Americans, because we are one of the richest nations in earth. I want to bring up just a couple of these studies. There was a great study that the University of California at Berkeley did. And their understanding was that when people get more financial resources, when we get more money, it tends to isolate us. They did a study with lottery winners, which are always fascinating to me. And one of two things happens with lottery winners. Either they take all the money that they won in the lottery and they spend it all and they go into debt and their life is miserable. Or everybody who they have ever known comes knocking on the door asking for money, and it destroys all of their interpersonal relationships with people, and they have to move away and take on new identities and change their name, and they become lonely and their life becomes miserable. Overwhelmingly, those are the two things that happen when you get a whole lot of money. The other thing that they found was not only does it isolate us in that way, but it isolates us because as we get more money, we get bigger houses. Your children don't have to share a bedroom. I don't have to share a bedroom like I did with my brother Steve for years. We all get our own bedroom. When you get more money and you move up the socioeconomic ladder in your employment, you usually don't work with other people. You manage other people. As you get more money, you don't have to ride in carpools or ride the bus sitting next to somebody anymore. You drive in your own car to get there all by yourself. And it tends to isolate us, and it tends to remove those relationships, which we just said 2 weeks ago is why church is important, right? But what their studies were finding, that the more money we get, the more isolated we become, and the less those relationships have with each other, and the less we care about them, and we act differently. This makes me laugh, this study they did. So in order to look at that data, they got a group of college students together, and they said that they were going to be part of a financial aid study group. And so they asked them to fill out a form with some information on them and asked them to put how much money they have in the bank right now. And if a student had more than 1.5 times the average of what a college student has in the bank, which I don't know how they determine that, but if you were above average, You went into one group. If you were below average, you went to another group. And they put them into a room as they were getting ready to go through this financial aid thing that they had set up. And for the students that were above average, had more money in the bank and more affluent in the community, they put them around this table, and in the center of the table was a big, giant bowl of M&Ms. And they told them that these M&Ms were reserved for children. And they said, across in the next room, there's a developmental behavior study going on with a bunch of elementary school kids, and they'll be coming in here, and the M&Ms are for them after they're done with their study. And then they left the room, and all they did was watch to see how many M&Ms they ate. Which to me is fascinating. I don't know if it's really a power of money as much as a power of M&Ms. Because everybody ate M&Ms, right? That's what I think is funny about this story. It wasn't a matter of did they eat the M&Ms, it was a matter of how many of the M&Ms did they eat, right? For the group that was above average, they ate 4 times as many M&Ms as the group that was below average. Because they weren't used to having to consider other people's perspective in things. They're used to being able to do what they want because they have a certain affluence in it. Now, people have said, money can't buy you happiness. I don't think that's true. It doesn't always buy you happiness. It can buy you grief, for sure. I would say it's not that money buys you happiness, it's what you do with money that buys you happiness. There's another study from University of British Columbia. They did an experiment where they went into Victoria, British Columbia, and they walked around early in the morning, and they gave out 200 envelopes to just random people on the street. Asked them their name and their address and their contact information, gave them the envelope, walked away. That's all that it was. Oh, and they asked them, how happy are you? From 1 to 10, how happy are you? The average, for most of us who live in Canada or America, it would be the same. The average was about 7.5 on the happiness scale. Gave them the envelope. For 100 of the envelopes, there was a $20 bill in it, and it said, spend this money on yourself. For the other 100, there was a $20 bill, and it said, spend this $20 on someone else. And so they had their contact information, let them go out throughout their day. They came back in the evening, contacted all the people they had given the envelopes to, and asked them what they did with their money. For the people who spent it on themselves, they said, well, I bought coffee with it, or it's still in my wallet, I'll use it for something tomorrow. Or they used it on things that they would normally use their own money for. Because it really wasn't enough money to splurge and do something. You couldn't buy like a Ferrari with it or anything, right? For the people who were asked to give this money for someone else, they heard all these stories. One of them bought a stuffed animal for their granddaughter. A bunch of people gave money to street musicians, which they said they never do. Some people gave it to people who were living on the streets as just a gift. Some people bought lunch for random people behind them or coffee for random people behind them in the lunch counter. And then they asked them to rate their happiness. For the people who spent the money on themselves, their happiness changed not at all. They're still at 7.5. On the average, the people who spent money on someone else, they bumped from 7.5 to 8.5. It's a full 10%, right? Yeah. I'm a pastor. I'm not a mathematician. I think it's 10%, right? Now, you could say, well, that's because, what if you're living in a place where things were scarce or you were struggling to survive? Would that really beat happiness? I mean, would that really be a way of happiness? And so they wondered that too. So they went to Uganda, which is consistently one of the 10 lowest income countries on the planet, and did the same thing, gave them some resources that they could either spend on themselves or that they could spend for somebody else, and the exact same thing happened. Their happiness was increased by at least 10%. Even in communities where food and resources and clean water is scarce, just being able to help somebody else change them. There is something about giving that we need to do. That's the thing that makes us different than the monkeys in the experiment. Because we can change things about ourselves. We can overcome those limitations. It changes us. There's a need within us to give And if we don't, it tends to isolate us. It tends to put us in these little boxes. It tends to destroy our relationships. It tends to make us think about everything as a relationship like this. But if we can find a place where we're generous, and instead of seeing the world like this, we see it like this, the world is different, right? If we can find ourselves in a place where we truly believe that every one of us is a beloved child of God, that we can all experience God's Spirit within us, and that Jesus invites us to be part of a Spirit-filled community where we could work for a world that reflects the reign and the justice and the grace of God. If we really believe that, that's not an attitude like this, it's an attitude like this. So this isn't necessarily a stewardship sermon. It's a generosity sermon. If your relationship with money is like this, if your relationship with anything is like this, then there's something that needs to change, right? If we see our finances, if we see our resources, if we see our community in a way that we approach like this, not only does it change the world, but it changes us. And so I hope here at Kennewick First United Methodist Church, we become a community that the rest of the world doesn't see like this, but that we all see each other like this. Amen?